Greetings. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I'd like to discuss the hermetic principle of gender. Now, what happens is when we talk about something like gender, people automatically and understandably go toward the physical counterpart of the principle of gender, meaning like male and female, men and women, boys and girls, and all of the sexual apparatus that is physicalized representation of the principle of gender. But what I want to discuss today is the psychological or the spiritual principle of gender, the metaphysical principle of gender, the hermetic principle of gender. Regardless of what your physical gender is, you are created as to be a balance of masculine or male and feminine or female. Just like a battery or just like a magnet has a positive and a negative pole. And a lot of times when we start to discuss things of gender, people misunderstand or get their feathers in a ruffle, thinking that we're talking about sexism and things like that. So be really clear that we're talking about principle here. We're not talking about men and women. Okay, we're way, way, way into another completely different topic, and it's very, very important to get clear on that today. Okay, for our purposes in magic, the principle of gender relates to the mind. Thusly, your thinking, conscious, active mind is the masculine part of your mind. And the deep, subjective mind is your feminine mind. Okay? Now, the masculine mind, and just to prove a point here, I know many women who utilize their masculine mind very well. They're very active. They're very much into deciding. They're decisive. They're into figuring things out. Whereas I also know some men who are very intuitive and allowing type beings. So it doesn't matter what your gender is. You're not necessarily, just because you're a woman, predisposed to one side of your mind or another. In fact, we don't want you to be predisposed. We want you to be able to use both sides of your mind in balance, in unity. One of the things that's been a blessing for our societies, the modern societies, that over the past, I would say, 100 years or so, or maybe even longer, but especially the last 100 years or so, is the concept of existential choice has come to the fore as far as our understanding of our place in the universe. The fact that we have the ability to choose. We have the ability to choose our politicians because we live in a democracy, and that's really even though our democracy is more than 100 years old, it's really sort of kind of sunk into our deep mind over the past 100 years. The idea that metaphysically that we can choose our own thoughts, that we can make a choice as to what we want our lot in life to be, rather than just being born into a particular position or born into a particular caste in life. So the concept of choice is that of our masculine self. The concept of choosing is our masculine mind. Okay, the masculine mind is there to make choices, and it's there to figure things out. It's there to it's there to be active. It's the active principle of the mind. So just think about that. Anytime you let's put it into a magical perspective. When you're doing a spell, your job, masculine mind's job, is to think, what do I want? How do I want it to be? Who, what, where, when, why, and how? Those are the questions that the masculine mind is there to do. So the male principle in your mind is all about choosing. Okay? Now the feminine principle of your mind is all about allowing, is all about giving birth. Think about the masculine side of your mind as the seed and the feminine part of your mind as the soil. All right? So once we choose a thought, once we choose an ideal, we must plant it deep within the soil of our feminine deep mind and allow it to grow. And the mysteries of the feminine mind are not for us to ever figure out. We don't know. We will never know how it works or why it works. It's not for us to know. It's a mystery. But just like you don't need to know how your optic nerve works, you don't need to know how radio signals work in order to use a radio. You don't need to know about the optic nerves in order to see. You don't have to understand the principles of television in order to turn on the TV and watch it. You don't need to understand the workings of your feminine mind to know that it works. It's a mystery. It's just, it will never be known. And so when we are able to impregnate the feminine mind with the masculine seed and allow it to grow, it will give birth as experience. In fact, it only does that. It's doing that right now for you. And that's why we say, look around, look at your life. What does your life look like? Okay, it's not your feminine mind's fault that it's given birth to these things. It's giving birth. It grows what's been planted. The problem is where you do have control, and that's over your masculine mind, over what thoughts you're planting. And what happens to most of us is our thoughts are uncontrolled and on autopilot, and it works in sort of like a vicious cycle. What happens is we use magic against ourselves constantly because we see a situation, we have a particular situation that's been brought about by a thought, and we react and we respond to that situation. We feel helpless about that situation, and then we make decisions about ourselves and our lives as a reaction to that situation, which then plants a new seed. And then that brings forth another result. And then we make another choice, another decision about our lives and our world based on the result. And then that plants another seed. And it can spiral way out of control. And that's why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And when things are going bad, they can only get worse. And when things are going well, they can only get better. Up to a point, because then we have other thoughts in our mind that says, well, I have a ceiling. I have a ceiling of how much bliss I will allow myself, and I have a floor as to how much misery I will allow myself. So those are thoughts as well. So we basically, if you notice that you channel between a particular ceiling and a particular floor, it's not because the universe said this is what you will have. It's not because of a particular astrological configuration that you were born under. It's not because of anything outside of yourself. It's simply because of the fact that you don't understand how the principle of gender works. You don't understand that you are a farmer, and that your masculine mind is the seed, and your feminine mind is the soil, and on it goes. On it goes. Okay. Now, did you know that because of this, that some of the greatest fortunes in history will be made during this crisis? It always happens. Whenever we are in a financial crisis, many people thrive, but more people fail. It's not because somebody was born with particular talents that they're going to thrive necessarily. It's not because they were born at a particular time. It's not because they were at the right place at the right time. It's because they were able to choose the right mental seed from their masculine mind and plant it within the fertile ground of their feminine mind and allow that to grow. Now, let's take this planting analogy further. Say you have, say you're choosing a particular result, and you're going to plant that seed, and you plant it into the ground. Okay, what do we need to do? We need to water it. We need to weed the garden, right? We need to make sure that everything is environmentally sound in order to give an optimal growing environment for that seed. Now, again, I don't buy 100% the concept in magic of magical seasonal planting of your magic. I do think that understanding the moon cycles and understanding the cycles of the sun are helpful, and I do think that there is something to that. But I think that the mental world goes beyond all of that at a certain point. So I don't want you to think in terms of being locked into seasons, like a farmer is locked into seasons with the with the planting of crops. Instead, think in terms of this is a magical garden, and it thrives at any time of year. Okay, but the optimal environment needs to be given to that garden. The way that we give the optimal environment to that garden is through our attitudes. So I've talked about this many times before, that it's only part of the process to actually do the spell, which is the planting of the seed, to use our analogy, into the ground. The next phase is to keep the garden free of weeds, which means to let go of all of our tendencies toward thinking negatively toward that topic in our life, which we will be confronted with those tendencies. Otherwise, we wouldn't have needed to do this spell in the first place. For instance, say you needed to do a money spell because you noticed that your expenses are exceeding your income. So you find a good way of doing that. There's so many ways to do that, but you've planted a great seed into your masculine mind, planted the seed into the feminine mind. Okay, that was the spell. You did that. But then remember, the reason why you're having financial difficulties in the first place is because there is a belief within you that has created unconsciously the environment for you to have financial difficulties. There's a belief that you don't have enough, or there's a belief that you'll never have enough, or whatever that thing is. Okay, so after you've done the spell, in order for your new found prosperity not to be eaten up by the weeds in your mind, it's important that you, on a regular basis, go through and weed your mind and say, well, what are my negative thoughts about money? And you go, it's great to just write it down. My negative thoughts about money today are, and you write them down. And then you go over each thought in your mind, and you say, well, I choose to think differently. Remember, existential choice, your active mind. I choose to think differently about this. And you flip that thought around. So let's say one of the negative thoughts that you wrote down was, I never have enough money. Rather than saying, I always have enough money, you don't want to set up an argument within yourself. Instead of saying, I always have enough money, say, every day I have more money than the day before. It's harder for your mind to argue against that. Every day I'm getting wealthier and wealthier. Every day my income increases. All right? When's a good time to do this weeding? Right before you go to bed. Right before you go to bed, because that's when you are able to have the closest access to the feminine part of your mind. So right before you go to bed, you write all this stuff down. You find that new thought, and you just repeat that new thought over and over again as you go to sleep. Every day, I'm becoming wealthier and wealthier. Right? It's important to remember that the feminine principle within you is only there. It's your connection to the goddess. It's your connection to the feminine principle of all of the universe. The goddess does not say no. The goddess just gives birth. The goddess gives birth to whatever seed is planted within her. Right? So it's not up to the feminine principle to choose what is grown in your garden. That's up to the masculine principle in you. That is the that is the farmer in you. That is the seed, and the sunlight is actually also that which is beyond your control, because that is the the universal source of all life. That is your life force that pours through the entire operation. So you don't have anything to do with any of it other than choosing. All you have to do is ask, what is it that I want? And some of the best ways to find out what you want is to find out what you don't want, because your life is set up beautifully. It's a perfect expression of everything you've been planting. So if you want to know what seed packets you've been using, just look in your life. Just look in your life. Just take a look around. And once you find out what you don't want, rather than focusing on what you don't want, because remember, the feminine principle does not understand not. All it understands is the seeds. And if you look and you say, okay, I don't want more poverty, all that it's hearing is the seed of poverty, the seed of poverty. But what you can do is when you say, oh, I don't want poverty, therefore I want abundance. I don't want loneliness, therefore I want a mate. I don't want sickness, therefore I want health. Then you can create that new seed for yourself and decide what it is that you do want to plant, what you do want to plant. Remember, there is no such thing as poverty anyway. There's no such thing as sickness. There's no such thing as pain. Well, let's take these things one at a time. Okay, first of all, yes, there is pain. Okay, I misspoke. Yes, there is pain, and I'm going to deal with that in a minute. But first of all, okay, what's poverty? Poverty is a lack of abundance. It's a resistance of abundance. Just like tension is the resistance of peace. You cannot get rid of peace. You can only get rid of the resistance to peace. Peace is what's there already. You can't get rid of abundance. Abundance is the law of the universe. I mean, if you look at nature, all there is abundance. You cannot count the waves. You cannot count the grains of sand. You cannot count the stars, right? There is no lack. There's no such thing. The only lack is the idea of lack. The idea of lack, the idea of that you could suppress or you could squelch out this abundance, right? And so since there is no lack within you, the goddess just keeps giving more and more and more and more of what you've planted. So anytime you've got a problem in your life, don't say, oh my God, I got a problem. No, you say, well, look at how powerful I am. Look at how powerful this whole process is. If I'm able to create this, I can create anything. Once you can take responsibility for the way your life looks and realize, okay, this is simply a growth of a seed that I've planted deep within myself, I can plant a new seed, easy. And the goddess is very fast to do that. In fact, it's quicker and easier to plant within your garden seeds that are in alignment with the natural order of things. And remember, the natural order of things is peace, is love, is beauty. That's just how natural it is. But since we have been given free will, we can think any thoughts we want. We can choose any seeds we want, even seeds that are foreign, that aren't even real seeds. Does that make sense? It's like you can sow the seed of tension, even though tension is in itself a false concept. But you have to be able to sow a false concept because it's freedom. There's freedom in this world. But you're going to get peace a lot easier than you get tension, because tension doesn't really exist. Tension is a false construct that we've made up. Tension doesn't really exist. We just think it does. Hatred doesn't exist. We just think it does. Poverty doesn't exist. We just think it is. In our three-dimensional world, it can seem very real because that's the job of the world, is to give us a real expression of what we're thinking. That's how we know what we're thinking, because it's there. That's how we know what we're thinking, because it's there, so that we can choose to think a new thought. That's how perfect the world is. It's scientific in that your experience in life is the exact sum of your habitual thought patterns, those seeds that you've been planting. But the good news is it doesn't take a long time. It doesn't take a long time to change your life around. It just takes commitment. It just takes focus. That's all. Okay, but I do want to talk about pain, since I touched upon it and I really did misspeak a bit. Pain exists as a divide. Pain and pleasure are there for us to know what to repeat and what to avoid. They are teaching tools. Those are teaching tools. They are cause and effect. And you have 6 senses. You have 6 senses. You have the sense of touch. You have the sense of sight. You have the sense of sound. You have the sense of smell. You have the sense of taste. And then there's the other sense. Not psychic. I mean, it is, but it's not ooey ooey. It's your emotions. It's what's in your gut. That's a very real sense. Everybody knows what emotions feel like, right? So your emotions are the most important sense in regards to what we're talking about, because they are the closest thing that connect the 2 parts of your mind, that which is masculine and that which is feminine. That's where they're joined. And remember, if it feels good emotionally, that means you're thinking things that are in alignment with your highest good. If it's feeling bad, it means that you're thinking thoughts that you need to change, right? So if you touch the fire and it's hot, you pull away and you learn, oh, I better not touch that, right? If you hear the sound of a crash, you know, oh, something just broke. I better go find it. If you hear the baby cry, you know that it's time to go attend to it. If you smell gas, you know, oh, there's a leak somewhere. I better go fix it. All of your senses are there to tell you yes or no. Well, your emotions are there to tell you yes or no. And the problem is that we don't want to feel our emotions because somehow we got it that either they're not important or that we should be ashamed of them, or somehow we have some story about our emotions. But actually, we need to feel our emotions so that we can know whether we're on the right track or not, right? Remember, all of the desires that have been put into your heart are there to be fulfilled. That is the goddess speaking through you. That is God speaking through you. So if there's something in your life and you have an emotional, I don't like that, it's because it's not supposed to be there, right? So it's not that difficult to figure out what you like and what you don't like. What you like and what you don't like are there to be fulfilled and there to be extracted. So if you want something out of life, you're supposed to have it. And your emotions teach you whether you're on the right track to getting that or not. So it's important for us when we're doing this spell casting and we're working with this seed planting that we use all of our senses, but most importantly, our 6th sense of emotion, to be able to determine whether or not we are on the right track or not. And if we're not on the right track, remember, emotion is just thought moving through the body. Emotions always are connected to a thought, and they are always connected to a desire. So if you have a feeling in your body, ask what the emotion is. Write it down. What is that emotion? Oh, fear. Okay, well, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of blah, blah, blah. What is the desire attached to that? Oh, the desire is to run. Okay, now look at all of that stuff and just say, okay, now what could I do? What could I do to change this thinking to create a new result? Well, I could change this thought like we did earlier. Like say, okay, let's see, okay, I'm afraid that I won't have enough money. Okay, what is the desire? The desire is to survive. The desire is to protect myself. Okay, now what could we do to change that thought? Well, let's see, the desire is the fear is that I won't have enough money. Well, how about if I start thinking the thought, every day I'm more wealthy. Every day I get wealthier and wealthier. And that desire, let's look at that desire, rather than to protect myself, my desire is to contribute to the good of the world. My desire is to contribute to the wealth of everybody else. Well, what could I do? Maybe I could give some money. Maybe I could go give some money to a charity or to a tithe or whatever it is that I feel empowered to give. Maybe I could just give some money, and with that, just think the thought, okay, with this gift, with this tithe, I now empower myself to recognize that every day my wealth is increasing more and more. Another thing you could do if you're feeling fear is just say, okay, well, let's see, well, what is working for me in my life? What am I grateful for? Especially around that topic of money. Well, do I have enough food today? Okay, I'm grateful for that. Do I have a place to live? Well, if you do, then I'm grateful for that. Obviously, you have a computer, or you wouldn't be listening to this, so you're grateful for that. What else in the material world do you have that you're grateful for, right? And then look around you and see, well, how much in the material world do I have that I don't even need? Okay, so I have a surplus. Well, what could I do to feel more abundant? How about if I give some of this to somebody that needs it? How about if I give some of the stuff that I don't even need, I don't even use, that I'm just kind of hoarding, that's in storage or whatever? What happens if I give that to somebody that needs it? Well, what happens to your emotion when you do that kind of thing? It breaks forth. You're actually changing things, because you're changing your thought. You're changing your emotion as a result of changing your thought. You're changing your desire. And therefore, you are, going back to where we started, creating a very important environment for your seed of prosperity that you've planted in your spell to thrive. Does that make sense? Remember, your emotions are the first indication of how things are manifesting in your life. So if you can take care of things on an emotional level, you don't have to get to the point where it manifests into a situation, right? If you listen intuitively, to what your emotions are telling you and take care of that energy, take care of that vibration on that level of manifestation, you can change things around a lot more quickly than waiting until you have some situation come up and hit you in the face that you have to address. Because remember, what we said before is the way we plant our seeds in our feminine mind is usually automatically based on a reaction or a response to our physical universe. So if you wait, again, to use the prosperity image, if you were ignoring your emotions, if you were ignoring what your emotions were telling you, and you just were stuffing your emotions, stuffing that fear and not paying attention to it, that energy is going to have to manifest somewhere. So it's going to manifest in your life. So maybe you bounce a check, maybe you get a ticket, maybe something happens or some big expense that you just can't afford, right? And then what happens is then you go, oh, look, all this stuff always happens to me. Why is everybody always out to get me? Why is the universe out to get me? Look at this. Well, then there's another seed that you're planting. All this stuff happens to me. The universe is out to get me. That's another seed. Then that'll eventually grow into another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. Instead, you can nip it at the bud and get into that place where it's the more subtle aspect of part of manifestation, which is your emotional body. And if you handle things as they come up emotionally, you won't ever have to go through that. You're weeding your garden before the weeds take over your plant that you've planted. So the importance of understanding the principle of gender is that you have one mind, but it has two sides. It has a masculine side, which is the active, choosing, masculine part of your mind. That's your conscious awareness, everyday awareness, where you can do things, where you have control over situations and things. Then you have your deeper, feminine, dark, underground earth mother mind. And that is the mystery. That's the mysterious part of you. That's the unknown feminine mystery within you that gives forth birth to all of the seeds that the conscious mind plants. It's important to understand these two aspects of mind so that you don't ever think that things just happen to you. That you understand that if there is a situation in your life, even if it looks like it could not be your fault, somewhere in your mind you bought it. Somewhere deep in your mind you planted that. So instead of thinking victim, instead of thinking a disempowerment, anytime anything happens to you in your life, you can make a choice in saying, oh, I get it. I have a seed within my mind that grew into this experience. And if this experience came forth, I can plant a new seed and change it. And in fact, I've been given all the tools in order to have what I want and have the life that I want. And the more that I have the life that I want, the more that other people will be inspired to have the lives that they want. So how do I do that? Oh yeah, I remember Ariel was talking about the emotions. I have to start paying attention to my sixth sense. And my sixth sense tells me what's on its way to me. So if there's joy in my life, yay, I want to keep doing that. If there's fear or hatred or anger or impatience in my life, I'm grateful for that too, because I'm able to weed my garden of those things prior to having to deal with them as situations in my life, prior to having to deal with them as very brute force reality, as very dense manifestation. It's much, much, much quicker to pull the weeds out at their root when they're little babies than to wait until they're big old honking plants that are sucking the nutrients out of my new plant, right? So remember that you're a gardener, and your conscious mind is the chooser. It's the decider. It chooses what you want and what you don't want. But remember, focusing on what we don't want gives us more of what we don't want, because all thoughts are seeds that we plant deep within our mind. The best thing to do is to figure out what we don't want and ask what we want in its stead. Follow our emotions and find out what we can do to change the thought and the corresponding desire with that emotion so that a new seed is planted, and we know that that seed has been planted properly once that emotion has been lifted, and that there's no end. Don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about getting all of your dreams and all of your heart's desires, because then what would you do? It would be so boring. Not at all. It's an expanding universe. Eli taught us that the universe is expanding, and Einstein taught us that the universe is expanding too. The universe is constantly expanding. There is no end to life. There is no end to the possibilities of what you're capable of doing. So it's okay to get what you want in this world. It's okay to rise above things and get what you want in this world, because there will be new possibilities and new opportunities that you never even dreamed possible. I'm so glad that you tuned in. I hope that you continue to write to me. If you have any questions or any comments about our podcast, please give us an email, and I hope to see you or hear you real soon.